What if you could actually hear the past? I mean, not just read about it in a book, but really, truly listen to it. Well, today, we're diving into an incredible story where history and cutting-edge technology collide to do exactly that, to resurrect a voice that's been silent for 3,000 years. You see, this ancient Egyptian belief, it's really the heart of our story. For them, this wasn't just some poetic idea. For one man in particular, it was a deep, sacred wish for his journey into the afterlife. And in what has to be one of the most unbelievable twists, modern science has actually found a way to grant that 3,000-year-old wish. So this whole project, it really centers on one of the most, well, mind-bending questions you could possibly ask about history. It sounds like pure science fiction, doesn't it? But nope, this isn't a movie plot. A team of incredibly dedicated researchers has made this a reality. So let's meet the man whose voice has finally broken a 3,000-year silence. Now, this story isn't about just any mummy. The subject of this groundbreaking project was, in so many ways, the absolute perfect candidate, almost as if he was chosen by fate and by his own ancient desires. Let's put a name to the voice. Meet Nesyamun. He lived in Thebes, that's modern-day Luxor, all the way back during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses XI. For almost 200 years, his mummified remains have been right here in the Leeds City Museum in England. So what was it about Nesyamun that made him the perfect person for this? Well, he wasn't a pharaoh, but his entire identity, his whole life, was tied to his voice. As a priest at the massive temple of Karnak, his job involved spoken prayers and sacred chants. His voice was his instrument, his connection to the gods. And this is where the story gets really poetic. The inscriptions on his actual coffin specifically say that he wanted to be able to speak again in the afterlife. It was a crucial part of his soul's journey. So the researchers weren't just picking a random mummy, they were, in a very real way, trying to fulfill his most sacred wish. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how on earth can soft tissue like a vocal tract survive for 3,000 years? The answer is the incredible science of Egyptian mummification. It was the super careful ritualistic process. After cleansing the body, they'd remove key organs. Then came the secret sauce. The body was buried in natron salt for 40 days, which completely dried it out. That was the crucial step for preservation. And because they did such an amazing job, Nesyamun's throat and airway were found to be remarkably intact. All right, so we've got a perfectly preserved mummy. But how do you get from that to an actual sound? Well, it all comes down to some surprisingly simple anatomy and physics. Okay, so here's the key thing to get. Your voice, it's not just your vocal cords buzzing. That's just the start. The sound is shaped by your entire vocal tract. Think of it like your own personal biological instrument. The exact size and shape of that tube, from your voice box to your lips, that's what makes your voice sound like you. And you really don't need to be an expert to get this. Every single vowel sound we make, ah, e, o, it's just our tongue and throat creating a different physical shape. That's it. So the theory is pretty simple, right? If you can perfectly replicate the shape, you can replicate the sound it makes. So they had the theory. But how do they actually put it into practice? Well, this is where you bridge that 3,000-year gap with some seriously 21st century technology. The process is just so clever, and it breaks down into 4 main steps. First up, they needed a perfect blueprint of Nesyamun's vocal tract. To get that, they took him to a hospital for a detailed medical CT scan. From those scans, they built an exact digital 3D model. Then, they sent that model to a 3D printer. And finally, they took that printed model and hooked it up to an electronic larynx, which is basically a device that creates a buzzing sound, just waiting to be shaped. And here you can see it actually happening. I mean, just look at this image. It's this incredible moment where ancient history is literally meeting modern medicine. Nesyamun's mummy, so carefully laid out, being scanned layer by layer to capture the exact dimensions of his throat and mouth, all without disturbing a single ancient fiber. And the outcome of all this work is a tangible, physical object, a plastic, 2-scale replica of an ancient priest's airway. An instrument that had been silent since the Bronze Age was now sitting in a lab, ready to be played. Okay, the stage is set. We've met the man, we know his wish, and we've seen the incredible machine they built to grant it. I think it's time to hear the result. Let's have a listen. So that's it, a single, steady vowel sound. It was made by passing a sound wave through that 3D printed model of his throat. Listen again. The scientists describe it as a sound that falls somewhere between the in the word bed and the ah in the word bad. Now, it's really, really important to understand what we are and what we are not hearing here. As the lead engineer, David Howard, explains, this isn't Nesyamun's living voice from his time as a priest. Parts of his anatomy, like his tongue, are dried out and flattened from the mummification. So this is the sound his vocal tract would make right now in its current state. It's like the ghost of a voice, not a full resurrection. But even as just a single vowel, this achievement is huge. It opens a door to the past we all thought was sealed shut forever. So what does this all mean, and where does this technology go from here? This actually isn't the very first attempt to hear the past, but it represents a massive leap forward in accuracy. You see, earlier projects, like for Utsi the Iceman, they had to rely a lot more on digital models and, well, educated guesses. Nesyamun's voice is the first to be produced from a precise, physical, 3D printed model of an actual, preserved human vocal tract. That's a real game changer. So, okay, it's cool science, but why does it really matter? Well, imagine walking through a museum exhibit of the Karnak temple and hearing a voice that could have once echoed within its very walls. It could help us understand the acoustics of these ancient places. But maybe the most profound thing is that it gives us a direct, audible link to another human being from a time we can barely even imagine. It brings us right back to that original belief that in some small, amazing way, hearing this sound makes Nesyamun live again. And the team isn't stopping here. Their next goal is even more ambitious, using computer models to simulate a moving tongue and jaw. That could mean we might one day hear entire words from the text on his coffin. It just proves this is only the beginning. And it leaves us with one fascinating question. Now that we have given a voice to the dead, who should we listen to next?